What's shaking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football YouTube channel. I'm Geoff. That's Anwar. We will be with you for, well, however long this video goes. We're talking Texas OU today. That's it. It's a Texas OU discussion 24 hours-ish before Oklahoma takes the stage at Big 12 Media Days. 48 hours until Texas does the exact same thing. Do us a favor before we get too deep into this. If you haven't already done so, like the video. We'd like it. And hit that subscribe button if you want to see more videos. We will be live on Thursday when Texas finishes up its Big 12 Media Day session. It'll be Geoff and Anwar and a live interactive party right here on this channel. So yeah, man, hit that subscribe button and hang with us all week long going into the football season. We are not that far away. Mr. Richardson, yes, Texas sir. OU. When I just say that this year, what's the first thing that pops into your mind? It is the discussion that defines the season in a lot of ways.
You know, it's interesting to just, you just think of the success, that OU's had. And I know Texas fans are going to get pissed off. Don't fast forward yet. But you just think, 6 straight conference titles, man, that is impressive. And, it's interesting, Ketch, when I remember Lincoln Riley's first media day. And I remember being there. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't quite sure what to make of that hire. It seemed like, Stoops, he leaves and it's kind of at an awkward time that he does it. Lincoln Riley takes over. And, and I think there was, there was some thought, especially from the Texas end, that, Texas clearly is going to have the advantage.
Yep.
This guy's first job out the gate, what's he going to be able to do? I don't think people really were able to anticipate this level of success that we'd have, and really how he's kind of elevated the program to a consistent, a CFP contender, not just a title, Big 12 title contender, but like next level. And now he's actually created this team and they've gotten better in many areas, but the defense is going to be interesting to catch going to this year. I think it's the year 2 with this defensive coordinator and what that's going to look like. But you can see how he's molding this program. And so it's going to be interesting because I would say Texas looks at OU and Texas fans would never say that. But OU is at a position where Texas wants to be at, and they want to be at that back to consistently at 10 wins, winning conference titles, and then wanting to compete for a CFP. The only thing that Texas fans have been able to do really is say, when they get to the CFP, OU loses. But they got there, right? At the end of the day, you can't knock them for getting there. You can't knock it. Somebody's like, well, he married Halle Berry. And it's like, but you got divorced, but you still married Halle Berry. You're still able to pull it off. So it's an interesting thing of one program that's on top and then the other program that wants to get back to being on top, and, in the different ways they're going to try to achieve that.
Probably only on Orange Bloods would, you hear people get on David Justice because he was only married to Halle Berry for a few years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Couldn't keep a woman, seemed better on campus.
Yeah.
You know what it would be? They would make.
Man, he still got Holly, man.
By the way, shout out to the Orange Bloods poster, Jamaica Shane, who had his wife is going to be a cover girl on Maxim.
Oh.
Did you see that thread?
I'm about to.
Yeah, man.
And I will put this on the screen very shortly in the editing process.
You met him at the Houston event over wings.
Well, I didn't meet his wife, clearly.
Huh? Well, she wasn't there.
Huh?
She wasn't there.
Yeah, I would have remembered that. But yes.
He kind of had told me, and I was like, okay. I believed him to a certain extent, but there was also part of me that was like, she can't be as attractive as you're telling me she is. And then he posted some previous photos, and she is more attractive than he said she was. She's quite stunning.
So he's
anyway,
rich. He's rich is what you're saying.
Texas OU.
He's rich. Go ahead. You're totally off the rails already.
Well, look, man, it happened on Orange Bloods in the last 24 hours. It's going to get referenced. I don't think people forget that Lincoln Riley and Tom Herman came in together, not under similar circumstances. I think you pointed it out. the expectation when the change came was that, oh my God, Bob Stoops is finally gone. Like, ding dong, the witch is dead. And there wasn't a real feel for what the hell Lincoln Riley even was. So Tom Herman shows up, and it's like, we got the hot. That's what Texas fans thought. We got the hot guy. And look what he did at Houston. And he beat Oklahoma. Like, you know, they thought they had the advantage. And what was really interesting, if I were to write a book about this current, if there's ever a Steve Sarkisian book, the story might begin with Tom Herman in one of his first press conferences in that first season, admitting that he wasn't comfortable doing the very thing that Lincoln Riley was having amazing success with. Texas thought they were hiring a guy who the offense would be his. He's the offensive genius. Nobody's taking that out of his hands. He's going to develop quarterbacks, and off we go. And in the end, Tom Herman wanted to be more of Mac. He wanted to be Mac Brown, who once upon a time had been an offensive coordinator at Oklahoma, but didn't show up at Texas as an offensive coach. And they thought they were getting an offensive guru. And I think missing on that component of Tom, that he wasn't nearly the guru that they thought they were getting, is exactly the reason why Steve Sarkisian got the job. It was already a narrow talent pool that Texas could choose from on the head coaching front, but getting somebody, if at all possible, with real offensive teeth, a real history of on the offensive side of the ball being dynamic and being unafraid to be in control of that side of the ball. Sark reverses the Herman mistake in that area. And all of that is a response to trying to catch Oklahoma, who has a head coach who does all of the things that an offensive coordinator does without slowing down the head coaching part of the job. And that's who Texas has to beat. So when this Steve Sarkisian era takes over, and we talk about what we think of Sark, and a lot of that is he's got Bijan, he's got a quarterback battle. What does he get out of this group? Because the thought is whatever they get out of it, it will be what he gets out of them. Mm-hmm. And this is just correcting the mistake that Herman proved to be in not being able to be that guy. Because if your offensive guru isn't better than your main competitor's offense, like if that's your number one competitor's thing is they have an offensive guru. If you're going to be about having an offensive guru as well, like that's going to be your identity, you can't have the lesser guy. Yeah. And in Herman, they had the lesser guru. Sarkisian makes for he has not done what Lincoln Riley has done in the last 4 or 5 years at Oklahoma. But the last few years, he did do it at Alabama. His overall career resume is really impressive on the offensive side of the ball. Watching these two guys, this is what I'm interested in. Watching these two guys and who from here, let's say for the next 5 years, has the best offense in the Big 12. I mean, Texas hired Steve Sarkisian to topple Lincoln Riley. And it's just not nearly as easy of a task as saying it out loud would have you indicate.
It sounds great on paper, right?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds great. Oh, well, he was out of Alabama, and Saban, and win a national title. Like, it sounds great. And you know what? You know what else sounded really good on paper? Tom Herman.
Yeah,
that sounded great. That sounded great on paper too, right? Under Urban Meyer, won national title there. Was the OC over there? Goes to Houston. Has like you said, beats OU, beats Louisville.
Anwar. On paper, he was an offensive guru.
Yes, he was. And then what happens is, you said we find out that he says, I don't feel comfortable calling plays from the sidelines. And he feels more comfortable in the booth. And then, in fact, the play calling thing was something that he just didn't want any parts of it. That's how Tim Beck was able to survive for the longest time. And then eventually Maryland happens, and he's saying, all right, I've got to take over play calling duties at this point because this is just not working. Now, he didn't do a bad job as a play caller.
No,
what's ironic,
he should have done it the entire time.
Exactly. Probably should have from day one said, this is me. And so that's what Steve Sarkisian comes in and says, this is my offense.
Yep.
I'm going to be the one that's responsible for it, and I'm going to run it. And like you said, in that arms race to catch up, with OU, you've got to take it on your own. And it is, these offenses nowadays, and especially in the Big 12, are so good, and these guys can put up so many points so quickly. I mean, you got to have a person who's calling the plays that is 100% confident in what they're doing and knows how to do it. And I'm not saying that Tom did not. That's not a disrespect to Tom Herman, but where we're talking about what Sarkisian has to be able to bring, I mean, you got to catch that guy. And we're talking about at OU, you've got to be able to play chess. Like you can't play checkers with that dude. He will burn you. He will burn you. And I know Iowa State fans or get a little riled up because they feel like they're being a little disrespected, in this conversation. But like 6 straight is 6 straight. It just is what it is. And so Sarkisian's job, task, challenge, everything is, all right. Everything that I did as a play caller at Bama, I've got to be able to do it, but I ain't going to have the same talent now. There's a little bit difference to be able to call the plays with that kind of talent. And even, most of the play callers that they had, the offensive coordinators at Bama, have been pretty good. Whether it was Kiffin, who was the guy that was at Maryland? He was an OC there for like a year. He was a head coach at Maryland. Loxley. He was the OC there, and they had a really good offense when he was there for that year, calling the plays. And then Sarkisian. But what can you do when you're outside of that? So it'll be interesting catching the battle this week for attention. What Steve Sarkisian says that really gets the fan base excited about him. He enters in this Big 12 media days, and this is what the fan base has been shown so far. You only got 2 players worthy of the Big 12 team. We feel like there are 2 other teams that are better than your team in this conference. And some people don't think they're the 3rd best team, but he's being told is just a program, right? If there's just a guy, you're just a program. And at some point, Steve has got to get the excitement and have guys, the fan base feeling like, man, there's going to be a new horizon coming.
Let me just I want to follow up on the point that you just made.
Go for it.
But I want to circle back and just say that if I was an Oklahoma fan, and if you're trying to make sense of what is Texas now versus under Tom Herman, I think a smart Oklahoma fan isn't worried about Texas yet because Texas got to prove that they weren't being worried about when you've won 6 straight. Like, you don't worry about a lot of people. Like, I doubt Oklahoma's worried about Iowa State. They've earned the right not to worry. But if you looked at Texas, you would say, well, I'm not worried, but they fix that offensive thing, because I think they would feel like our guy's better than that. And it's no disrespect to Tom Herman to say he's not better than Lincoln Riley. Like, that's not a slap in the face. Lincoln Riley has been a historically good coach who's never had a season where he didn't win a conference championship, and he's got his teams in the playoffs. Like,
there's probably only 3 people better than Lincoln at this point, Catch. Probably Saban, Dabo.
I mean, it depends. I mean, we're no longer calling Urban Meyer, even in the iteration that he existed in a year ago where he wasn't even on the sidelines. He was still in the Holy Trinity. Mm-hmm. But he's in the NFL. And it would be disaster for his career if, like, I really think it would be his last job if he flames out and doesn't spend any time there. So yeah, man, if we're talking about the top 3 right now, Lincoln Riley, it's Nick and it's Dabo. And then if we're in a world where Urban Meyer no longer gets to count as a college coach, there's probably a Kirby Smart conversation to be had.
Maybe.
But I think roll call is short.
Yeah.
Steve Sarkisian isn't yet on that roll call. And this now leads me to, but I would say if I'm an Oklahoma fan, I would at least look at Texas and say, well, they fixed the thing that was broken that gave us the biggest advantage, which is our guy is super confident and your guy is not. I mean, in this one realm, Sark shows up and he ain't tripping. He'll call plays. He's had experience doing it. So you don't worry that Sark is going to tackle something he's never done before. So they have fixed that particular glitch. Now Texas has to worry about some other glitches. But is our head coach capable of going toe-to-toe with the other guy's head coach in this area? Head coach is undetermined. Offensive leader, though, yeah, that's an interesting little battle now. And I think might define the Big 12 for the next half decade or so. Once Sarkisian, if he can, gets this program to a point where they're really competing with Oklahoma and not just saying things like, well, man, last year's game was kind of close. So since it was kind of close a year ago and, you could have flipped a coin or something like that, that just instead of just saying, well, it's going to be competitive because we're badass and we got a bunch of badass players and we have no fear in anybody, Texas is still at the point where it's looking at last year's result and trying to find a moral victory out of it to justify being spoken in that same breath entering this season.
You know what? I think, honestly, what I think an OU fan probably says, Catch? Heard that shit before. I think an OU fan probably says, oh, you guys said that with Charlie Strong. Uh-huh. Yeah, we heard about that and how they're going to fix these things and do these things on defense. They probably say the same thing. Oh, you guys said that about Tom Herman. And they're probably going to say, here go Texas fans go again. And so to your point, if you're an OU fan, you say, okay, maybe they fixed it, but you still.
But there's a lot more to fix.
Yes. I mean, because Texas still has to figure out the quarterback situation, right? They still got to find receivers that stand out. There's a lot more that goes into it. It's not the easy fix.
Let me ask you this question. We'll change directions and talking about this Texas OU specific special edition of the Texas Orange Boys Texas Football YouTube channel. I don't know. I just reset like I'm in radio. In radio, that would have been a very professional thing to do. Here on Orange Bloods TV on YouTube. Where, in your mind, where does Texas get OU this year? Where can they attack? What side of the ball? Which matchup? Which players? Is it as easy as pointing the finger at Bijan and go, hey, man, go be you, because we really are going to need you to in order to win this game. You have to have a monster from him. But, what are the areas where you look at and go, this guy has to play well. This guy has to play well. They have to win their matchups. And they do that. Now we're talking.
I would start, honestly, from a play calling perspective, because if you go back to that Texas OU game last year, Texas had their foot on OU's throat. I mean, it was to the point where they did have to bench Spencer Rattler. As great as he is now, they did have to bench him. And Texas, when they could have just said, all right, let's try to put this thing away, when it got conservative. Went away from the thing that that had gotten them the lead, went away from the thing that had that young quarterback shook, because that was your perfect opportunity. As we said, you got a senior quarterback in Sam Ehlinger, a freshman quarterback in Spencer Rattler. Like, if there ever is the time to catch OU slipping, that would have been it. So for me, Catch, I think it comes down to a play calling perspective. I think the talent's there, OU side, the Texas side. But I think from a play calling perspective, that's where I think it's got to be the difference. I would start there, and I'll see what you think about that. But Sarkisian's got to be the person that, again, we talk about matching wits. If you do get the advantage, you'd stay with what's working. That was one of the things that I think Texas fans always got frustrated with Coach Herman, was that it was like he did something, it worked, and then he would go away from it. And you're just saying, that's that thing. At some point, you're saying, well, we're just going to do it until you stop us. And it'll be interesting to see too, because the one thing that Herman would always say is that they would take what the defense is giving them. And then sometimes there's something to be said for just imposing your will. So play calling, I think, catches, to me, if you're saying, like, where do you start before we get into players? And I want to just get your opinion. I think play calling is where it starts.
I mean, yeah, that definitely continues in the trend of what we've been talking about at the opening of this video is, Sark. Texas really needs in October for it to be a legitimate Sarkisian Riley showdown, and that it play that way out on the field. That's the way it needs to look. I think, though, when we mention Steve Sarkisian in this showdown that takes place in a few months, I'll just start it off. I think of all of the games on the schedule, Bijan Robinson against Oklahoma more than any other game is because Sark likes to talk about, he wants quick strikes and he wants an offense that doesn't have to work hard to score. But Oklahoma is a game where if your offense can both put up points and be successful, but keep the other team, that's a game where you want OU's offense off the field if you can. So there will be games this year where Sark will look at it and go, we need to go all gas, no brakes on this team. And I want to be up multiple scores in the second quarter because then we can do everything. But this is a game where, to me, you've got to control the pace. Oklahoma is the team that historically is so good from it's a 10-10 game, and then quick strike touchdown, 3 and out, quick strike touchdown, and a minute and a half has gone off the clock, and you're down 14 points. And so you've got to be able to you got to make it a shorter game. And if there's a game on this schedule where Bijan getting 20 to 25 touches, maybe being involved in the passing game a little bit, getting him a real workload and it being an effective workload, I think on this Texas team, I don't know of how many great equalizers exist. Bijan might be their best. So against Oklahoma, if you're Texas, your best player has to be at the height of his game. And if Texas's best player doesn't get an A or an A plus in that game, players not as good as him are going to have to in order for Texas to win the game. So it feels like I don't know that there'll be a lot of games on the offset where I'm like, oh, if Bijan's not great, they can't win that game. Yeah. But there's a couple. And I think Oklahoma's at the front of that list.
Yeah. And, when I was thinking, I had to go look it up to make sure I had it correct, because you're 100% correct. And the thing that, just adding on to that, the thing that OU doesn't get enough credit for, because you talk about like quick strikes, you want that offense off the field, but man, on quiet as a church mouse catch, their defense has gotten a lot better under Alex Grinch. I had to look up his name, and looked up. OU had. I didn't know this until I started doing this research. We were talking. They recorded 39 sacks last season. Catch, which was ranked 3rd in the country. They also forced 19 turnovers on defense, which made them, that's top 20 in the country. And so Spencer will get all the attention, and then Riley gets all the attention, but what Alex Grinch has done from a defensive perspective, that is going to be another component, because whatever quarterback Texas puts out there, you're talking about that's going to be what their 5th start at most at that point. So, and you've got to go into the belly of the beast in that game and that atmosphere, and it's going to be packed again. So everything is going to be wild. And so, yeah, you can't ignore that quarterback conversation and what a guy like Grinch can potentially do from a matchup problem to make guys see something. And, and really then at that point, Catch, what does this offensive line from Texas do? Like we've had question marks about it. We've been on the record saying, not sure. We'll have to see what happens. And that's another area where, attacking from different positions, getting creative on defense, I think that becomes another interesting area. And how will Sarkisian combat that? Because that they're gonna go and attack some of the weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean it's really even hard to talk about the Texas offensive line. The good news is my experience at Texas in 20 plus years is that if you have a special player at running back or quarterback, it elevates what's around them on the offensive line. And really, it's the thing that we always used to talk about with Emmitt Smith back in the day with the Cowboys. When he showed up, you had the likes of Mark Tuinei, who had been a nothing player. Nate Newton had been a cast off. Mark Stepnoski had been a guy that, was like a 3rd round pick in '89 in their initial draft, but was just a pretty good player. Kevin Gogan was a nobody. They hadn't drafted Eric Williams yet. Emmitt Smith arrives, and that offensive line was nothing. But you put one of the best running backs in the history of the NFL behind that group, and suddenly you had offensive linemen who turned into Pro Bowlers and all pros. Great running backs can be the tide that lifts some boats. Maybe not all boats. Maybe that's too generic and too easy of an expression to lean on. But a great play. I mean, look, we saw it in the final 2 games of the season. They put 2 new starters and young guys that had not played very well. But having a Bijan Robinson that's a difference maker, that K-State and that bowl game didn't end with people saying, don't know about that offensive line. Instead, they were saying, that group, we're going to be okay next year. That's okay. Look how good they were in the bowl game. And they were good. But my contention is great running back makes average offensive lines look like, at the very least, slightly above average offensive lines. And if you can add above average quarterback play, because Texas played in a national championship game against Alabama and had a chance to win a national championship in the 4th quarter, and they had a sorry offensive line. I mean, David Snow's the only guy that got a cup of coffee in the NFL, and that was for a season or 2 as an undrafted free agent. The rest of those dudes were just guys.
Yeah.
They still won all their games. They didn't need a bunch of all Big 12 players or NFL players because they had an NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
NFL quarterback and NFL running back. I'm a lot less worried about the offensive line than I would otherwise be. You're more worried about the guy getting killed than play in and play out being able to I think offensively be good.
Yeah, no, you're 100, because Deontay Foreman's a great example of that.
Yeah.
There's anybody that went to the pros off that offensive line, right? I don't.
Connor
Right? Was he a freshman that year?
Connor.
So he was a freshman that year?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So maybe one guy then, and then a bunch of other guys, who were there, but you couldn't tell them nothing at that point. I mean, they were blocking the hell, out there. So I totally agree. I think, Coach, it's the Bijan Robinson conversation, because this what you're talking about is this team needs a playmaker, right? They need to have someone that you can just lean on and saying, this is what you do well. I think that was always the thing for the past couple of years with the Texas offense was you can never say what they really did well. It was spurts here, but you can't hang your hat on anything and say, this is what they do. So you're right. If you're looking for an advantage there, I definitely think that is, an advantage, for tech potential. If you're talking about like exploiting something there. Here's the other thing, Ketch. I want to ask you something. From a defensive perspective from Texas, knowing how close they got and knowing how well they performed in the first half and knowing that there's a lot of these guys who are back, do you think that gives Texas, a mental advantage of them feeling like they can tell themselves, man, these guys ain't that good. Like we almost had them. Like because that's what you do in sports, right? You can be a defeated guy and still find ways, and you can tell yourself a lot of things. But because they were able to hang so close, and because that game kind of got lost and it went into overtime, so on and so forth, do you think this defense goes in and says, we make a few adjustments and this happens?
I think the human condition is you at all times, for the most part, tell yourself whatever you need to tell yourself to put your head on a pillow and sleep at night. So Believe me, I played on bad teams. I played, this is high school football stuff, right? But your experience is your experience. I grew up and played in the AISD at a time when my district had Reagan and LBJ and Travis, 3 teams that were all state top 10 level good. And we knew they had Division I prospects. We knew they had big time players. And we still told ourselves, hey, we'll get our one shot like Eminem and we will take advantage of it. And, like that didn't really happen. That's not the way the world works most of the time. Every year Texas tells themselves they're ready. I think defensively, the biggest edge that Texas probably has in this game, and it's one that it's hard to say in a 60-minute setting just how valuable it can be, because it could be incredibly valuable and then it can be completely bypassed as something that matters. Okay. But that Texas defensive line at the point of attack is better than Oklahoma's offensive line at the point of attack. Oklahoma's going through some transition on that side of the ball. They'll have a good offensive line. But when you look at Keandre Coburn, when you look at Mario Jomo, when you look at, I'm curious what Alfred Collins becomes this season. Because while I call Bijan Robinson the best player on this Texas team, there's one guy on that defensive side of the ball that could turn into a supernova sooner rather than later, and that would be Alfred Collins. Mm-hmm. But you start adding up, Texas doesn't know where its pass rush is automatically going to come from. But I think they feel like at the point of attack, they're going to be stout and that they're going to be able to control the line of scrimmage, and that in a game against Oklahoma, I bet right now they think they can control the line of scrimmage, nullify that Oklahoma running game a little bit. Then it comes into, okay, if they can do that, the ball is now in Spencer Rattler's hands. Mm-hmm. And what does that look like going against this Texas secondary? You and I think we like the corners on this team.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of the safety play. I mean, somebody asked me the other day about BJ Foster and did I think this was the year? And I haven't sold all of my BJ Foster stock. I bought so much I couldn't get rid of all of it. But it's been the last two seasons. So we're talking 20, almost 24 games. Yeah. We've seen BJ Foster not be a plus player for this Texas defense, whether it be injuries or inconsistencies or whatever. It's a long time since that Georgia Bowl game when you were saying that guy's got a chance to be a star. He was one of the 10 best players on the field. Now it's like, oh boy, I'm not going to get burned by saying I'm expecting this to be there. Maybe he just never finds a light switch, but that conversation kind of exists across the board at safety. It is an unsettled position. They need guys to step up that, whatever Caden Stearns wasn't a year ago, he was still an NFL drafted player who physically gave them a physical presence in the secondary and made, I think made the standard plays last year fairly well. They don't even have a bona fide, just going to be at the right place at the right time all the time kind of player right now. And it's the thing most about the Texas OU matchup this year from a Texas perspective that I think Texas should be concerned about. Number one quarterback in the country in the NFL, all that receiver talent that they have matched up against this Texas secondary. Will they be able to find a weakness to exploit? My reaction in July is yes, they will. And it's one of the reasons ultimately I wouldn't pick Texas to win this game in October this year at this point. And I would need to see a lot to change my mind, specifically because it feels like bad time to have that matchup if you're Texas.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're going to start off out the gate with a couple of tough games, and then before you start getting into the conference, and so you're absolutely right. We don't know what that looks like after after that start of the season. If they start off 3-0, catch, and then confidence is riding sky high. Then all of a sudden things change. But what we've seen though, catch, we see it too often in Texas is that sometimes when these kids, especially if they lose early, they start losing confidence. And we've seen a lot of just bickering and turmoil. And BJ Foster is an interesting example because one, there's been the health issue, him staying healthy. Two, there was him quitting during a game last year. Can't ignore that happened. Like, dude got up and left, but then showed up the next day. Like nothing had happened. So, so what happens from like a mental standpoint? But yeah, I'm with you. Like, what does that safety, that secondary look like? They switched the receiver to go back there and to add some depth back there. So they were a little bit concerned as far as what that safety, position looks like. So, but is there any position you feel like defensive line Texas would have the advantage though, going against, if we're having a conversation in July, right?
Yes.
Okay. Any others?
Yeah, I'll go with one more.
Yeah.
I think that D'Shawn Jamison, just as a talent, has a chance to be a game breaker in that game.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about a guy who's a first team all Big 12 corner. So that's the tag he gets going into this season. He's a preseason first team all Big 12 defensive player. One of two guys on this team, along with Bijan, in that kind of category. We've seen him make spectacular plays as a corner. And obviously we're now legitimately talking about one of the best return guys, I think, in the history of the Texas program. I keep thinking to myself, teams are going to figure out they got to just stop kicking to this dude. Just don't. But up until now, they have not. And college coaches are a weird deal. I can go back almost 30 years and John Malkovich accidentally kicking the ball to Leland McElroy when he swore during the week. Well, there'll be a lot of things that happen this week in this game. We will not kick the ball to Leland McElroy. This was back in 1994 when I think A&M won that game 34-3. They kicked it to Leland McElroy. You want to guess what happened?
I'm guessing it. I think I know where this is headed.
How many yards was it? All right. It definitely headed.
Yeah. How many yards was it?
Way. Yeah. I don't remember if Leland went like 97 yards and got pushed out at the 1, or if he scored that day. But they kicked to Leland McElroy, and Leland made John Malkovich pay in ways that John Malkovich oftentimes would say things in the media and then pay later for them. But D'Shawn Jamison can be that guy. So in a game where Oklahoma on paper is better than Texas, where you can't, but in a rivalry that these games play close a lot of times. They go to overtime. They stay close enough that you can bench your quarterback and then bring him back in and still win the game. D'Shawn Jamison has a chance to be a momentum swinger against Oklahoma. And I would say over a 12-game season, it'll probably only happen 2, 3, 4 times where D'Shawn Jamison makes it'll happen, but you won't be able to set your watch by it every game. But if Oklahoma, let's say, scores 3, 4, 5 touchdowns in that game, they're going to be kicking off 3, 4, 5 times to D'Shawn Jamison. If you give that dude opportunities, he will take it to the house at some point. Like, he is fantastic. And so if you're asking me, if we were doing a power poll, top 5 guys that you think have to play well against Oklahoma in October for Texas to win the game, Bijan and D'Shawn Jamison are my top 2.
Yeah.
Top 2. Because if you tell me that D'Shawn Jamison is the second best Texas player against Oklahoma, that means he definitely did something on special teams and then played well enough on defense that whatever the hell he did on special teams doesn't get mitigated. Like, oh, well, yeah, he took it to the house, but then he got burned a couple of times. No, if you tell me that D'Shawn Jamison is a game ball worthy player in that game, I like Texas's chances significantly more. And in a weird way, if that doesn't happen, then I'm concerned that Texas doesn't have the bona fide playmakers to match Oklahoma playmaker for playmaker. That's OU's biggest advantage right now. I mean, even in the running game, they don't have Bijan Robinson, but Eric Gray was an all SEC running back a year ago. He transfers to Oklahoma. He's regarded as the single best offensive, definitely the best running back that transferred this year during the transfer portal season, but he's going to get some real conversation, I think, for best skill position player, period, that transferred over. So like they will be good at running back as well. And so D'Shawn Jamison has to play well because OU on paper has more bona fide playmakers. Texas doesn't. And it just means in that game, they can ill afford for any of their top guys to not show out. I mean, they couldn't survive either Bijan playing poorly in that game or D'Shawn Jamison just being a guy. He's too important.
Yeah. And then OU also I was trying to say, didn't they also get like a really good offensive lineman?
They got two offensive linemen.
Yeah, two through the transfer portal, right?
But they got a tackle from Tennessee that will be, if I'm not mistaken, day one starter at left tackle.
Yeah. So they've even improved it over on that side. But yeah, I'm with you. You've got to have a healthy Bijan who's out there and making plays. And again, he's got to be a guy that's probably has to get a lot of touches, in that game. D'Shawn Jamison, for sure. I was trying to think of if there was a third person, in there, but those two off the top of my head, I'm sure someone put something else down in the comments, but right. He's got his work cut out for him. But the crazy thing about this game, though, Ketch, and this will be my final, thought on it. I still saw Charlie Strong win this game. It's just, it's crazy things happen in a 5-win season. We still remember, that was Charlie's crowning achievement. I've told this story before on previous ones, but this is for the new viewers who maybe not who haven't heard this story. So Charlie, Texas beats OU that year. I don't know, was it 15 or 16? I can't remember which year it was. And it was, Charlie, he comes into the press conference giddy, right? Because everybody was doubting him. Things were going bad. I think Texas was 1-3 at that time, something to that effect, or 1-5. I forget what the record was. Anyway, Charlie comes into the press conference. It is like a side door. There's a podium in front. He comes through the side door, and Charlie's strutting like George Jefferson, right? You guys thought I couldn't do it, huh? And he starts high-fiving everyone in the media who's in the front row. Brian Davis, you thought I didn't do it, huh? Kirk Bowles, you thought I couldn't do it, huh? I mean, and it was probably the happiest that I've seen Charlie. And then, of course, we saw the, obviously Sam Ehlinger versus Kyler Murray. So, and we know Kyler Murray is still the better quarterback, obviously. But on that day,
great point.
Sam Ehlinger played extremely well. So that's the other part is all these matchups, crazy things aside. Again, Texas had a hellified lead and almost, could have won. So that's the other thing about this crazy game and love about that, that rivalry. So that'll be my parting shot. The Charlie Strong memory. And actually, that's it. This is the Charlie Strong memory.
I love that Charlie Strong memory. It'll always be the finger.
And
what people
finger.
what people did with that concerns me. There's just some things you're never quite prepared for than seeing the Charlie Strong finger point thing and just everything that came with that, all the commentary that even today exists.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
It's weird. I'll just say my parting shot. Two things. One, hey, Texas fans or OU fans, we've got some OU people who've been watching the videos and seem to like them. And I guess mainly because we're not constantly saying OU sucks and, they're terrible with all their trophies. That terrible team with the streak. Put in the top three. Put in the comments your top three for both teams. I'm curious. I'm, Spencer Rattler. The quarterbacks are an obvious one.
Yeah.
I'll just end it on number 3 for me. Maybe Dicker the kicker.
Oh shit, that was what I was going to say.
Because if he's the punter this year, which is a storyline going into camp that will be interesting to see how the punting battle works out, because you and I both liked Dicker last year when he inadvertently takes over the punting duties And they got better on that side of the ball with him there. If he's doing both gigs and suddenly he's a critical player, suddenly if he can have a game where he's making his kicks, kicking the ball out of the end zone, and then in the punt game, burying Oklahoma deep in its own territory a few times, it just changes maybe for an entire quarter, Oklahoma can't get out of the Texas 20, 25, 30 yard line. Dicker would be a guy that potentially could have his fingerprints all over that. If he couldn't do that, he's a guy that could completely flip it the other way as well. So yeah. Quarterback, corner / return guy, kicker for me. And then the rest of the guys, I think you could pick 20, but those 3 guys for me stand out. Look, I enjoyed today. I thought this ended up being, we showed up and it was like, what are we going to talk about today? And we were both like, how about OU? And then it turned into, I think, a really interesting and thoughtful. I thought you and I were both fantastic, Anwar. We were somewhat so biased. Smart. You know what it is? Biased. You told me that I was correct like 15 times in this particular video. That does not happen every video. I do not get, Catch, you're on fire. That's 100% right. Yeah. You said that a couple of times a day. It's the little thing that my heart needed today to just feel like I'm doing okay in the world. So look, give us a like if we did okay in this video. Subscribe. We've got more great content coming all week long, rest of the summer long. And then when we get to August and it's football season time, I promise you, we're going to blow your socks off. We've got some stuff in the plans. Stay tuned. But we're excited about where we're headed with this channel and with Orange Bloods in general. And we will talk to you both tomorrow and Thursday from Big 12 Media Days. Anwar will have coverage tomorrow from Big 12 Media Day. Check out the channel. He'll have videos. I mean, I don't want to oversell it. The plan, though, Anwar, is you'll have videos tomorrow from Big 12 Media.
So I don't think we'll do you and I may not do the dialogue, but I'll try, because I'll be out there on scene in Arlington. I do have a home security system, fellas, so just understand that. Just FYI. And clearly you guys know I'm strapped.
And those 3 Rottweilers.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I'll have some videos there trying to just gather the scene for people who don't have a chance to attend media days and show you some things that happen behind the scenes. So I'll probably post that on Wednesday for content here. And then Ketch and I will go. People have been asking for us to go live because we haven't had live. And when we say live, like that will allow you to go into the comments. So sometime in the afternoon, after, probably sometime I would say after like 4 o'clock Central Time, if you want to kind of mentally plan for that. That's probably where we'll go live. And the live shows, I can just tell you this, you never know how that's going to go. And we may talk for an hour. We may talk for 2 hours. I mean, we've done these things after games where we were talking at 1 a.m. 2 a.m. in the morning on our live, because games may end at 11 o'clock by the time everything happens. So get ready for the live show on Friday for sure.
FYI,
Thursday.
You think those 3 Rottweilers are nice when they're with Anwar, but yeah, tread carefully. They're Rottweilers for home security for a reason. For myself and Anwar Richardson and his 3 Rottweilers, don't you even think about it, you scumbags. We will talk to you tomorrow from Dallas. We'll talk to you later.